a black ops so extreme that it could change the course of the Horus Heresy, or a setup so well executed that it defies reason? Which is it? That's the question when we're talking about the plot to assassinate Alpharius, Primarch of the Alpha Legion, by a ragtag team of Istvan V survivors, some of the handful of Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders to escape the drop site massacre. So we're looking at events that come from the story The Seventh Serpent by Graham McNeill, and this is one of those tales where it gets very, very convoluted and it is quite hard to follow. Once you get to the end and realize the twists, then it all falls into place and makes sense. But it does start quite slow, though it sure does take off when it decides to get moving. And just gonna say before we dive into this one, that it is one of my favorite Warhammer 40,000 stories, and it just shows how the novellas and short stories of the Horus Heresy are where a lot of the most tasty bits are, the best morsels of Warhammer lore. With that said, I'm just going to cut to the chase and get to the heart of the story, because it is a lot of total badassery, but it's wrapped in intrigue and political bickering like a beef Wellington. We're going to ignore most of the pastry and get right to the beef. So our A-team is none other than the crew of the Sisophium, and our star player is Nykona Sharrowkyn, the Raven Guard who shot Fulgrim in the head with a Needler sniper rifle and nearly killed him. A man who has a greater fate and destiny than nearly anyone less than a Primarch. And there are some rumors that he's returning to Warhammer 40,000 soon, since he's last seen in stasis and could easily return without a bunch of shenanigans. But Shuroken is aboard the Sisophium doing hit-and-run operations, harrying the traders for years after the drop site massacre on Istvan V. He's working closely with his homies from the Iron Hands, like Ironfather Sabik Wayland and Frater Thematica, and Cadmus Tyro, the acting captain of the Sisophium, as well as Atesh Tarsa, an apothecary of the Salamanders. You know, the all-star team from Sons of the Selenar. And while the Sisophium is out in the void, harassing the traitor legions and harrying them during their movements, hit-and-run tactics, guerrilla warfare, they come across another group of Iron Hands that are doing the same thing, the ship Iron Heart. And the commander of the Iron Heart is the Captain Shadrak Meduson, and he's totally turning into a legend. For Meduson knows that the traitors will feel what the Loyalists are doing more if they fear what is happening. And to that end, he creates a character, which he becomes. He wants them to know that it is him that has been hitting their ships. For if what is happening to the heretics is the work of a mastermind, a genius of warfare that is a ghost that cannot be stopped, then it will be much more effective. So he embraced that mantle, legend. He became more than the sum of his parts, and let his name become a folk legend, a horror story that would be told throughout the traitor legions. And to that end, Shadrak Meduson was successful. So Nykona Sharrowkyn wraith slips aboard the Iron Heart when they show up, tagging along to observe what is happening between the Iron Fathers of the Sisophium and the Iron Heart's crew. And after they meet, as Sharrowkyn is hiding in the rafters, in the shadows, as he's one of the best at wraith slipping, possibly only second to the Primarch Corvus Corax himself, Meduson calls out, letting Nykona know that his presence did not go unnoticed. From the Seventh Serpent. Shuroken grinned, but it fell from his face as he sensed the presence of others. He vaulted onto the wall and sprang towards the ductwork overhead, rolling over onto a perforated conduit run. "What is it?" Wayland asked. Shuroken looked down the corridor as three warriors appeared, dark shapes against the bare steelwork of the restored bulkhead. Their battleplate grated and hissed, but they walked with the sure swagger of warriors confident in their invincibility. One carried a melt-a-gun, another a Volkite charger. The third carried a weapon that Shuroken didn't recognize, a tubular construction with multiple glass tube barrels that crackled with cerulean fire. They paused in the narthex, as though looking for something, and Shuroken had the powerful sense that they knew he was there. "How began Wayland, but Shuroken cut the link. The shadows around him expanded, becoming darker than the blackest night, seeming to flow around him, welcoming him into its fuliginous embrace. Shuroken knew that was how it would appear to anyone who might actually see him anyway. To wraith slip was to become one with the darkness, to own the black and let it enfold you. Its embrace was cold and solitary, for it came from a time when there was no light. Years of training in the deepest mines of his birth rock had given Shuroken an affinity with darkness that few beyond his legion could match. To live sightless in the depths, with the black, slithering things closing in at every turn, soon taught a warrior how to hide. He became a ghost, a rumor of movement and a whisper of belief. One of the Iron Hands glanced up, but looked away just as quickly, convinced by his hind brain as much as his eyes that he had seen nothing out of place. Shuroken soon left the three warriors behind and felt the darkness melt away as he eased himself into a side passage. He was alone, and rolled from the conduit, swinging down to the deck and landing with a barely audible thud of boots on metal. "You're good. I'll give you that," said a voice at the end of the corridor. Shuroken spun around, dropping to a crouch and automatically reaching for his pistol. He halted, his hand a hair's breadth from the grip as he saw the broad-shouldered silhouette. "My ship fought tooth and nail to stay alive after Istvan, Brother Shuroken," said Shadrak Meduson. "Did you really think I wouldn't know when there's an intruder aboard?" It's pretty dope and shows that Meduson is a lot more observant than the typical Iron Hand, even the masters of hit-and-run stealth tactics like the crew of the Sisophium. And Meduson lets Shuroken know that he wants to consolidate power and gather all the stragglers left of the Shattered Legions into one fist. And Shuroken says no, that it is much better to be spread out since there are so few of them. That gathering together just sets them up to all be taken out at once. So there is a lot of that political intrigue stuff going on, and eventually Meduson reveals that he's intercepted a communication that suggests that the Alpha Legion's Primarch Alpharius himself will be at a certain place at a certain time, and he intends to assassinate the Primarch to cut the head off the Hydra. And Shuroken and his Iron Hands allies are the perfect team to do it. Nykona Sharrowkyn, remember, domed Fulgrim with a sniper rifle and nearly ended him. If anyone can take out the Alpha Legion's Primarch and win a huge victory for the Loyalists and boost morale while at the same time sowing discord among the traitors, it is the crew of the Sisophium. Now, a lot of shenanigans ensue, and all is not what it seems in this story, which becomes very clear by the end. But Iron Hands don the colors of Alpha Legionnaires to infiltrate an Alpha Legion outpost. It was pretty awesome, really. Like if a group of mechanics from a local garage infiltrated the CIA. I was thoroughly impressed. And the Morlock, Vermanus Cybus, if I recall correctly, made a point of noticing that he could tell every one of the men on the mission, each one by a certain tell. One was headstrong and walked that way. One had a very slight limp, one a bionic, etc. So it was interesting to see how the disguise wasn't as thorough as, say, when Alpha Legion impersonates someone. It was only armor deep, and the Iron Hands all felt very, very uncomfortable in their new colors. At one point, the Salamander's apothecary, Atesh Tarsa, comments that the Alpha Legion is no different than anyone else, as far as gene seed goes. There was nothing about their gene seed to suggest why they'd turned traitor. No obvious flaw or abnormality. It made him consider that even his own legion could have ended up siding with Horus, and how the chips fell was not down to a genetic predisposition in any way. He was actually very impressed with how stable their gene seed was. So the mission gets crazy, and Iron Hands dressed as Alpha Legion end up fighting Alpha Legion. And during the fighting, it becomes obvious to the reader, but not necessarily the people in the story, that the Alpha Legionnaires they are fighting may just be Loyalists who have broken with Alpharius. Remember, nobody outside the Alpha Legion other than Big E and Malkador know about Omegon. And yes, they know about him as evidenced in the story the board is set, which is contrary to some of the things I've said on the channel before. But hey, there's a lot to Warhammer 40k, and I'm glad to learn and more than happy to admit my mistakes. Okay, so things go so sideways it is ridiculous. It goes all Wild West shootout, and things get wild when Alpharius shows up. He's a huge brute for a space marine, but small compared to his brothers. But his accompanying legionnaires are not with the guys on the base. So they open up, and this is when the Iron Hands posing as Alpha Legion open up too, and it gets all sorts of crazy. But Shuroken is perched somewhere with his sniper rifle and takes a shot and downs Alpharius, who it was said had black hair, a handsome face, a tattoo of a serpent, Hydra, around his left eye and the side of his head and face, and an omega-shaped scar on his right cheek. He goes down, and the Alpha Legion with him pull him back behind cover. And this is when Shadrak Meduson shows up. And his men are actually Alpha Legion, or most of them. And yeah, Meduson, who set the whole mission up in the first place and provided all the intel, pulls his face off and reveals that he's the real Alpharius. He kills, maims, and otherwise incapacitates the team, and is tossing their bodies around like they literally weighed nothing, showing a level of strength not unlike a certain Killganger chief in the Beckwin books. I mean, Alpharius is unstoppable, but then it is only Sharrowkyn who stands to oppose the Primarch. From the book The Seventh Serpent. A Primarch's face walking slowly towards him. He held Frater Thematica in one hand as though he weighed nothing at all. "You're Alpharius, aren't you?" said Shuroken. "The real one, I mean, not a doppelganger or some homunculus." "I'm as real as I need to be right now," said Alpharius, tossing Frater Thematica to land alongside Cadmus Tyro. Sharrowkyn rose from Mason's corpse and circled slowly towards the fallen Iron Hands. He bent to retrieve the sword he'd dropped. Somewhere nearby, a refinery exploded. A blazing cloud of white flame mushroomed skywards. "You're good. I'll give you that," said Alpharius, with an appreciative nod as he mirrored Sharrowkyn's movements. "I was sure Mason would kill you." "We Ravengard are hard to kill. Istvan should have taught you that," said Shuroken, dropping into a fighting stance and readying his swords. Petrochemical droplets slid down each blade, cutting through their coatings of ash. "Clearly you haven't heard what's been happening on Deliverance," grinned Alpharius, bending to retrieve Asher Mason's Hebemesser. Shuroken tensed, expecting an attack. "Put your blades away, Nykona," said Alpharius, sheathing the butcher's knife. "I said you were good, but that shadow-slipping trick my brother taught you won't work on me." "We'll see," said Shuroken, aligning his sword blades, one low, one high. "No, we won't," said Alpharius, turning to walk away. "You're not going to fight me?" "As much as I want to, I'm not going to kill you, Nykona. At least, not today," said Alpharius. "Magnus asked me not to." "Good to know," said Shuroken, sheathing his swords. Alpharius laughed. "I like you, Nykona. You're a man who will saddle a gift horse rather than look it in the mouth." Shuroken knew good counsel when he heard it. Okay, the fact that Alpharius was impersonating the Iron Hands Captain Meduson so well that not even the other Iron Hands could tell, and his men were pulling it off just as well, speaks volumes. And the fun part is this is just another move in the Alpha Legion civil war, and Alpharius was there to not only destroy the Iron Hands who had been harassing the traitor fleets, but also to kill Loyalists from his own legion. Whether he knew them to be operatives of Omegon or not, one of his men did call a legionnaire on the station one of his, ostensibly him being Omegon. Allowing Sharrowkyn to live because Magnus wanted, that is awesome, especially considering that Nykona didn't even know Magnus the Red. But Magnus was not fully demon yet, and was still trying to make things right, or at least put his soul back together. But his prescience allowed him to know that Sharrowkyn would eventually end up with the Magna Mater, that it would end up saving the future of the Imperium on some level. I always say Magnus is a good dude at heart, and Alpharius, while totally deceptive when necessary, is totally a man of his word, as shown by how he doesn't kill Nykona Sharrowkyn, even though he could do so quite easily in the melee combat they were close to engaging in. Yes, Alpharius used a plot to assassinate himself as cover, a plot that he orchestrated. He got the best Loyalist Black Ops team in the Imperium to do the job, and he purged his own legion's ranks and thinned the Loyalist crew, or that of the Sisophium rather, to a skeleton crew. Pure Alpha Legion, total badassery. We get to see Alpharius fight, and it is brutal. But he doesn't want to kill his nephews, or his sons. He just does what must be done, in his mind. So he maims, he incapacitates, he breaks, but he doesn't kill them all. He just lays them side by side and allows Sharrowkyn to take his friends back to his ship and to the apothecary. The story was fun, for sure, but when there are Alpha Legion pretending to be Iron Hands and Iron Hands pretending to be Alpha Legion, and there are multiple Primarch fake-outs, It gets crazy, and it's not easy to follow, and I'm someone who not only reads but writes spy thrillers. If you love Alpha Legion stories, you're probably someone who is down for a cool double cross story, but this tale is a quadruple cross, and still has my head spinning. I find I really like the Alpharius in this story, and it isn't all about chaos or Horus or anything like that, just two guys who would be bros if things were a bit different. I can see little Raven Nykona drinking a beer on the porch with his Uncle Al while they take a break from working on a muscle car or some typical male bonding moment where they're not at war. But the scary part about it all, and I mean bone-chilling when you think about it, no matter what happens, who he has to kill, what he has to do, how much he cares or doesn't care for someone, at the end of the day, Alpharius does what must be done. And if he has any emotional response to it at all, it stays completely buried and has zero to do with why he does what he does. He's completely detached and separated from his insane actions. The consequences and how he handles them mentally and emotionally are never shown, if they do affect him at all. Alpharius is truly cold-blooded, like a serpent, like a hydra. And where the book starts with these quotes on the opening page, I will end the video with them here. Then think about them in the context of the story and Alpharius. Youth is easily deceived because it is quick to hope. Aristotle of Stagira. Unless a serpent devours a serpent, it will never become a dragon. Unless one power absorbs another, it will not become great. Proverb, circa Millennium 1.